Hi everyone and welcome back to WARNO. Today I'm going to do a deck build for the 8th US Infantry Division because people were asking about a NATO deck build rather than just USSR ones, which is understandable. You want to see what I would select for that particular faction. Now, my plan this week was to wait till the Davout Patch came out and do a bunch of deck builds, especially with the new German units. However, it looks like that patch is continuing to be a little bit delayed. So I thought I'll get this out of the way now. The reality is it shouldn't change too much in the next patch. And if it does, I could make a few notes below. But the reality is, at least this way you have a starting point. So we're on the logistics tab. My first choice personally is to always take the MUT CP. This is completely individual, perhaps whether you take the MUT or the M577. The M577 has slightly more armor. It has 2 front and 2 side armor, so it'll take a little bit more punishment, but the reality is if it gets hit by a cluster munition, it's dead anyway. My personal choice is to take the MUT CP. The reason for this is that you get 4 of them, whereas if you take the M577, you only get 3. And I'd rather have more than less, because if they do get destroyed, I'm going to want to replace them. The next thing I would take here for me personally is just supply. You obviously have a supply chopper, which has 2,000 supply. These things get shot down, in my opinion, too much, and I tend to lose them, so I wouldn't necessarily take that. The command chopper I would never take because I always get them killed. Now, some people will have used these to very good effect, I'm sure, but it's just not for me. So supply wise, you've got the M35 supply and the M113A2 supply. They both cost 30. The difference here is the M35 has less than 1 armor across the board. The M113A2 has 1 armor across the board. I would personally take that because it can take a tiny bit of punishment and sit behind your units at the front line. Don't get it too close to the front line, it will still die very easily. But both of them have 800 supply, so for me, I'd take that one. Now, the Hemmet is the other choice. The Hemmet is 80 points, but it does have 2,500 supply. It also has front armor of 1, side armor of 1, and rear armor of 1, and a top armor of less than 1. So it's got a little bit of armor. For me, this has so much supply, I would be bringing it in to supply artillery pieces, for example. There's no reason you can't take it to the front line, of course, but I will point out you only get 3 of those. The M35 supply, you get 9, the same as the M113A2. It's a bit of a balancing act. Personally, I would have the Hemmet in there as well. Whether you spend the extra 2 activation points to bring in more is completely up to you, and it's something I will come back to. But for now, let's move on to infantry. So infantry-wise, you have a good selection here. Personally, I would always take the military police. They are cheap and cheerful right off the bat. They only come in 1 vehicle, so it is what it is. But I would get those added straight away. Would you take veteran or elite? I would always take veteran. The more the merrier. They have a nice weapon. They have this lovely M67 RCL. It's very good against vehicles. Not as good as it was on release of this early access game, but it's still pretty damn good. So I would certainly have those guys in there. If you really want to get them elite, put them near a commander. Simple as that. The next thing we'll take a quick look at, just because they're sort of next in line, are the commanders. You have the choice of engineers, the mech rifles, or the Jaegers. Now, there's a little bit of a price difference here. So the Jaegers have a Carl Gustav, and they have the G3A4, and 4 of them, because there's only 4 of them in the squad. You've got the mech rifles LDR, who have a strength of 9 and therefore have a full array of weapons, and then you have the engineers, which are a 5-man squad. The other thing to pay attention to is what you can bring them in with. So these guys can come in the M113A3 or the M151 little Jeep. The mech rifles can also come in a M113A3 Dragon for a few extra points, which means that it has a Dragon launcher, and that can be used as an additional unit on your front line. It doesn't have to stay with the commander. And the last option is the Jaeger 4, which is coming in an Iltis. For me personally, for the extra 30 points over the engineers and the wider array of weaponry, and the fact that it's 9 strength, so 9 individual members, I would take the mech rifles because they're going to survive longer. And I'd also probably take them in the Dragon, because at least you can utilize that unit for something else. You could also bring them in the M151 and then just sell it afterwards, but I would bring them in the Dragon and just pay the extra price. You want to get 3 of them, and they want to come in as veteran. Pretty straightforward. The next thing I'm going to click on are the Engineers Flash. So much like if you're playing as the Soviets or the USSR, you would take the RPOs. The Engineers Flash are very good against infantry. I would definitely take these guys. What you bring them in with is completely up to you. Speed wise is something you want to look at. Road speed here is 108 and speed over ground is 72 in the little Jeep, and in the M113A3 is 79 on the road and speed 59. But to be honest, I would just bring them in the Jeep, because I'd be bringing these guys in a little bit further back and then moving them up. So in the Jeep, and add those guys. You get 6 of them if you bring them in as veteran. You get 9 if you bring them in as trained. Now, what I'm looking at here are the flash launchers, right here, and I'm looking at their accuracy. If you bring them in as trained, it's only 39. If you bring them in as veteran, it's 50%. And distance to the target also makes a difference in how accurate it is at the moment, for various reasons, and I'm sure that will be getting patched. But personally, I would take veterans. It just gives them a little bit more stress resistance, and the chance to hit is obviously 50%, which is certainly better than 39%. Equally, does that mean if you have 3 extra squads by taking them trained that you got 3 squads in? Not necessarily, because it costs the same. It depends how much money you have to spend. So you'll notice I take veteran a lot at the moment. That will change as patches come, and I will probably start taking more trained, unless they make infantry very sustainable on the field, in which case I might start taking elite. But at the moment, they're just too squishy for me. Do comment down below of your experience with infantry. Do you agree they're a bit squishy compared to like Wargame Red Dragon at the moment? Have you had more luck pulling them in and out and repairing them and rearming them and stuff? I found them just to die very quickly, and that's sort of what I've been seeing on some of the discords as well. But I'm interested to see what everyone else thinks. Other than that, you have normal engineers, you have engineers Dragon. The normal engineers have satchel charges. I've not had much experience with these yet. I think some people would say that they're very good. They were certainly very good in SD2, I understand, but I've not seen them used much here. Originally their range was much shorter. They increased it to 175 meters. Then you've got the engineers Dragon, which have a Dragon launcher, which, you know, for me, they're cheap, they're effective anti-tank. I see no reason not to bring those guys in, especially when they've got a strength of 10. However, you also have the mech rifles. Mech rifles can come in with a law. They have 3 M249 machine guns, and right now their accuracy is 99%, which apparently does translate into the game as being ridiculously accurate. You also have the mech rifles, which have the Dragon. So between the two, you got the Engineers Dragon and you got the mech rifles Dragon. Personally, I would actually be bringing in the mech rifles Dragon just because of their extra firepower. That said, they do cost more. So if you're wanting something cheap and cheerful just to sit in buildings or tree lines and provide some defense, you could certainly go with the Engineers Dragon. Personally, I would rather have something with a bit more utility, so I will take the mech rifles. Now, bringing them in, the M35 versus the M113A3, it's up to you. A little bit of fire support with the M113, no fire support with the M35, you're just going to sell it if you can. I'll probably bring these guys in, or at least one squad in, with the M113A3. And that is purely because that provides them a little bit of extra fire support, particularly in forests. Now, I'm going to skip down over those infantry and we're going to have a look at these guys. So the Fireteam AT4 were new for the 8th Infantry Division. The AT4 is pretty darn good. Decent accuracy when it's veteran. Decent penetration. Only one M249 and only a 6-man squad. But they are really cheap. These guys, very good in the forest against vehicles. Also very good in a town against vehicles. So I would bring those guys in as well. Now, You could increase their price a bit by bringing them in with a dragon, and that would also give them a longer range for anti-tank. Now, right now, there doesn't seem to be a cap on the amount of any particular vehicle you can bring in. So this is about how much you want to spend on this unit. You can either make them really cheap, for basically 35 points if you can send the M35 back, or you can make them double the price and have a dragon as well. I'm going to grab a dragon as well, because for me, ATGMs are just really good in the game right now, and are an absolute nuisance for me playing as the Russians, so I would probably grab that. Then you've got the option of Heimatsuchen, which were the little addition from the Germans to this deck, or one of the little additions. They have a Panzerfaust 44, they have an MG3, they're a decent unit, and they're reasonably cheap. You can only bring them in a truck, but I would stick them in there, because their experience is poor, but their stats are still pretty good. And you get 12 of them. So when you want to spam some infantry, these are your guys. You also then have the Jaeger. Again, they have the Panzerfaust 44, the MG3, they only have one. They're a little bit better perhaps because they are coming in as trained rather than just poor. You only get 9 of them. Pretty much the same, you just get less of them. I don't know. Personal choice. Rangers, I would certainly grab these guys. They've got the AT4, they've got the M249x2, they've got the carbines. There's only 6 of them, but they're a good squad. They have good stealth. You can bring them in the Blackhawk if you so wish. Obviously quite pricey. I just bring them in the Humvee personally. These were originally recon units and they got changed. Aero rifles, very good squad. 2 M60s. We've got the M72 Law. Very good, getting into forward positions, coming in a chopper. I'd stick those guys in as well. I'd keep them as veteran, as I do with most of these things. Now, you've got more points left here, and you are an infantry division, so I'd certainly at least fill the other second or 2 activation point slot. What you take here is debatable. I'm tempted probably to take some mech rifles again. I'm just in my mind deciding whether I would want to take something cheaper or more expensive. I think honestly for the versatility of the dragon, right now, I'm just going to take more of those, and we'll just take them in the M113, and then it just makes our selections easier. Fine, let's have a look at artillery. Now straight away I'm going to stick the M270 MRLS in there because it is realistically really good. You get 2 of them as veteran and you get 3 of them as trained. I'm just taking trained. There is absolutely no reason to take veteran for me with these right now. If you look at them and look at the rate of fire, if I click on that, the rate of fire goes up by 1. If I have 3 of them, then I'm increasing my rate of fire by 13. If I have 2 of them, I'm increasing my rate of fire by 2. So I'd rather have 3 of them and have the extra fire. Now, it's up to you what you bring in next. The big howitzer gun, the M203, is very good, so I'd probably take that. And again, you only get 2 of them. Do you take MRLS or do you take more of those guys? Kind of up to you, kind of how you plan to use them and how effective you feel they are. I would take some more MRLS because saturating an area with 6 MRLS is going to do some serious damage to someone's front line. Mortars, they can be quite spammy. They've had their rate of fire dropped. They're not bad units. The mortars are pretty effective if they get a direct hit. They can even damage tanks from the top. I would personally probably take the bigger one because it's going to hit slightly harder. The HE is 1.61 there compared to 1.22. So I'd stick that one in there. Again, I just bring them in as trained right now. You get 6 of them. That's more than enough. Let's hop along to the tanks. Now the tanks is where the 8th Infantry Division falls down. The tanks for the 39th Infantry on the Russian side are much better. Now the first thing I'm going to say is you want to take an M1 Abrams command vehicle, or command tank in this case. Just take 2 of those as trained. You will want a command tank on the front line somewhere, I'm certain of that. Other vehicles, I'd definitely take the A1 Abrams because it is the best tank you get. I would probably take this as veteran to increase that accuracy to 81%. Your rate of fire also goes up, which is helpful for tanks. There's some debate as to whether you should be able to increase your rate of fire in a tank, but that's a different matter entirely, especially if the tank has an auto-loader. But I would certainly take those as veterans so they can be up-vetted by the command tank. You could take some cheap Abrams. I would just take another M1A1 Abrams. I'd just take the best tanks I could here because you don't get the top-end M1A2s. You've got the M60A3. They're not bad tanks. They just need to be a wee bit closer. So if you notice that their targeting range is 2120 compared to the Abrams, which is 2295. You could also take a look at these things, which have these lovely TOW2 launchers, which do a lot of damage. These would be very good set in tree lines and things, in big open fields where it's going to be hard for the enemy tanks to get a shot on you before you sort of hit them with a missile, but they are so expensive right now. Very good, but really expensive. You got the CEV, which is basically an anti-infantry tank. I would probably stick those in. Just leave them as veteran. I mean, if you click on them and have a look, drop it down, static accuracy 60%. I mean, it goes up to 75. I'm not going to bring in more than 4, so I'd probably just take them as veteran as well. These are great in forests and things, or rolling up to the edge of a forest where you're going to be firing at another forest or a town pretty close. You know, the range isn't great, but they are devastating against infantry squads. Then you've got another 2-point slot left. I would probably take something else. You've got the Panzer, which is really cheap. It's not got the best range. Its penetration is 13. HE isn't great, especially if you compare it to the CEV. For a cheap little thing to bring in and be annoying, yes, they were pretty good at that in Wargame Red Dragon. I don't really see a reason I would bring them in here, though. I don't have the same feeling towards annoying units in WARNO as I did in Wargame Red Dragon. I don't feel they're quite as useful yet. That might change, but right now I would take another tank. For the amount of points you get in the game, it's just worth taking another big tank. You could potentially take the M60A3, but honestly I would just stick with a nice Abrams. You could probably take the M1 Abrams just so you have something slightly cheaper to bring in a pinch. You get 4 of them. That means you've got 12 good tanks overall. Hopefully you're going to be supported by a team member who's playing the tank deck. I'd leave it at that and move on. You could always come back and stick another set of tanks in if you want. So recon wise, they very kindly added the Bradley here. So I'm adding 2 stacks of Bradleys. Now here you're looking at the tow missile. That is probably the most important thing. Tow missile, if they come in as trained, has a 70% accuracy. Veteran, it has an 87% and then 105% elite, but you only get 2 of them. Now at the moment, veterancy in this game doesn't appear to make any difference to its scouting capability. Now in Red Dragon it made a difference in the sense that it could spot the units faster and dictate to you what they were faster, so it identified them faster the higher their experience. Doesn't say anything about that here, so I'm not sure they've implemented that. So you could go with trained, or you could go with veteran. If you go with trained, you get 6 and 6. It's 12 in total. They still have 70% accuracy on that missile. Bushmaster accuracy drops a bit. Increases to 68 versus 61. It's a bit up to you. I'm actually going to check them both as trained, because the reality is I would be relying on these guys for line of sight, so what they're seeing, and also the TOW 2 launcher. I'm not really bothered about the other weapons. The Bushmaster's very good, may I say, but for me it's about the TOW 2 launcher here, the range and the damage, versus a Russian tank deck. Otherwise, you've got the Scouts, and you have the LRS. The LRS have two M249, sorry, whereas they only have an M60. There's only 4 of those. There are 6 of those. Stealth is exceptional for both. Optics are very good for both. I would get the LRS if I could. I'd also just take them in the Humvee. These are something, again, that I'm going to send up to the front lines. Just leave them as veteran. You've also got the Jaegers there. They're a little bit more expensive. They do have the Panzerforce. They have the MG3. They come with a strength of 11, so they're going to be a little bit harder to kill. They only come in a little Jeep though, and we are starting to spend 3 activation points. But recon is really important, so I think it's worth spending an extra 3 activation points. Your other options are things like the little Jeep, which has exceptional optics, but the stealth is mediocre. You also have these guys, which have good optics, and you have the Kiowa, which has exceptional, but the stealth is bad. And you have the OH-58C Scout, which has this little minigun. I like exceptional optics, and I like exceptional stealth. It's a little bit more expensive, but I'd actually probably take the Jaegers, because that's got a mediocre and it's going to be seen easier. These guys only have very good optics, so for me, I'd take the Jaeger. And yes, they're only trained, but you get 6 of them, and all you have to do is move them to the front line, turn their weapons off, and leave them in a bush somewhere so they can see everything. Exceptional sight, exceptional optics, great. Moving on to anti-air. This is the Red Eye. Please ignore it, it is useless. This is the Stinger. Get that, it's not so useless. I wouldn't bring it in as trained here, I would bring that in as a veteran at least. That puts it up to 87%. If you technically take it to elite, it says it's 105% accuracy. I don't believe that. They have reduced its rate of fire, but it is still really good to stick in bushes and things. Very good against choppers, will even hit and target aircraft. Take them as veteran. You could take them as elite, you still get 4. I'd take them as veteran, and I'd just make sure that if you're in an area where you're going to get a lot of incoming aircraft, have a commander near them to boost them up to elite. Simple as that. You have the OH-58C anti-air chopper. Some people really like these. I'm not as fussy. I would take Chaparral because I quite like the Chaparral, and it's one of your only options here. But, you know, it's 56% accuracy, isn't stellar, but it's better than the 45%, so I would take those as veteran. The other thing to take is Pivads because they're still broken, perhaps not as broken as they were. You can take 9 of those with 45% accuracy, 56% accuracy at 6, or elite you get 67% accuracy. Now, I'm not sure how broken they still are. They were very broken in that they just didn't miss and their bullets tracked targets. I'm going to take them as veteran. If I could say for definite that they were still broken, I would just take trained, because they're going to hit their target anyway. But for now, we'll just take veteran. Up to you if you take something else here. I'm going to move on and maybe come back, because I want to have a look at the helos. Not a lot of choice at helos here. You have the Cobra with Hydro Rockets, and you have the Cobra with TOWs. I would stick a couple of these in, because choppers are still very good. You just got to be careful about the anti-air. And I would probably take one of those guys as well. You get 2 of them. Here, again, we're looking at the TOW. It's a TOW 1 rather than a TOW 2, so it doesn't have the same penetration, but it's still pretty darn good. And then finally, the Air Tab. Again, not a lot of choice here. The A-10 Thunderbolt, is a definite for me. I just stick that in there. I like the A10. It's really good. It has very good Maverick missiles. Accuracy isn't great, but it hits most of the time, to be honest. You got these Alpha jets. They don't have a lot of bombs, which puts me off getting them. You've got the Raven with the Seed, which I think is well worth getting. You got the F-16 cluster. It only has 2 bombs, but it is your only cluster plane at the moment. It's up to you whether you take it. You got the Fighting Falcon, which is your only anti-air aircraft. You do get the F-111 FHE bomber. I'd honestly take that as your bomber. Here you have a choice of taking trained, which really doesn't change your accuracy and doesn't really change your rate of fire because it's a plane with bombs, so I'd just take 2 trained. Personally, obviously completely up to your discretion, but I see no reason to take veteran for those guys. And then I'd probably bite the bullet. I'd probably take the extra 3 points and get the Fighting Falcon, just so you have some anti-air. One thing to know, which it doesn't tell you in the veterancy thing, is this changes your agility. So if you look at the bottom, agility, very good. If I put that up to veteran, agility becomes exceptional. I assume that translates into the game. It is not listed here. It is very strange. If you click here, this doesn't make a difference. It stays exceptional. But you have to wonder if it is affecting the agility stat. But for me, it's not a fighter, it's a bomber, so it doesn't need agility. But puts a question mark on what agility actually means in WARNO. If anyone knows, let me know in the comments if you know exactly what it relates to. But it starts to make me wonder how much detail is missing from this experience tab, this veterancy tab. Obviously, chance to hit, rate of fire and stress resistance aren't the only things here. Otherwise, agility wouldn't have just changed. So, big question mark on that. Now, just out of interest, if I click on a tank, yeah, that's really interesting. So, I was just having a quick look to see if agility was something else on the other tabs and that's why it was changing, but it's not. So, whether you take 1 or 2 is completely up to you here. Now, I have an issue. If I click through, you will notice that I have a point spare and I have nowhere to spend it. So I now have to make a decision as to whether I get rid of something and buy something else or just go with 49 out of 50. The reality is, I think at the moment I would want to try this deck and go 49 out of 50. Now, I honestly haven't played the 8th Infantry Division much, so I'd be really interested. What would you guys do differently? What would you take differently? There are no necessarily wrong decisions in building your own deck. You play to your playstyle, and you build a deck to your playstyle. I'm just curious what other people would take, whether you would take necessarily veteran infantry, or would you take more trained, or would you go the whole hog and go elite? Why would you go elite? What difference does it make for you? Have you noticed that difference in the game? We'll go for a quick deck recap at the end, as we always do. So we've got the MUT CP, we've got the M113A2 supply, we've got the Hemmet. Infantry wise, we've got the military police M67, we've got the mech rifles LDR, we've got the engineers flash, we have mech rifles, we have a fire team 84, we have Heimatsuchen, we have rangers, we have air rifles, and we have some more mech rifles. Then in artillery we have MRLS and M110A2, we have more MRLS and a set of mortars. In tanks we have the M1 Abrams command tank, we have the M1A1 Abrams ×2, we have the M728 CEV, which are very situational, and we have a little bit of a cheaper option for a main battle tank, the M1 Abrams. Recon, we have 2 sets of Bradleys because they are awesome, brought in as trained because all we really want them for is their line of sight and their tow capabilities. Then we have the Humvee with the LRS, and we have the Jaeger Aufkul, which have exceptional optics. Then for anti-air we have the Stinger C, we have the Chaparral, and we have Pivads. Helos we have 2 sets of Cobras and 1 set of tow Cobras. And then air tab we've gone a little bit heavier with a 10 Thunderbolts, the Raven for anti-radar capability, the F-11FHE for our bomber, and the F-16C Fighting Falcon, brought in as veteran since we have now noticed that there is a change to its agility when it comes in at a different veterancy. Question mark on that one. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. I hope this was helpful to see how I would build this deck. Obviously, as I say, comments below. I'm really interested to see how other people would build these decks. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all soon.